Hey, in the last video, I got a little bit overexcited about the box of six and the box of tricks and the way that I learned the pentatonic scale. So what I decided was in part two, I kind of clarify that theory just a little bit. And this is how I bundle it all together and how it squidged into my brain so that I could remember it all. Now remember, we talked about the box of six being your box of tricks. And in a sense, that's kind of right. Now imagine this is your fretboard and these are your 6 notes that you're playing. 5 of those we've already established are the 5 notes of the pentatonic scale. And we also said that this pattern repeats itself diagonally downwards, so the same pattern will slide across and go down in the same way that it repeats itself upwards. Now this is all good because we're still with this same single pattern of 6 notes, our box of 6 being our box of tricks. Each one of those will repeat diagonally and again and so on and so forth. And it doesn't matter where you play within the pentatonic scale, you will always fall within one of these boxes of 6 notes. Great. Always, doesn't matter where it is, within one of these 6 notes. Now, we talked about this box of 6, but this is a pentatonic scale. And we've talked about the fact that with all the paper that I threw away in the last video, that there are actually 7 if you don't count the repeated octave note. There are 7 notes in major, minor scale or whatever. So, and those notes are important, but they're not included in the pentatonic scale. So we need to know where they are. And so I've included them on this chart here. Now, if you think about your box of 6, if you add those 2 extra notes here and here to your box of tricks, then it becomes like a Swiss Army knife. It pops out with those extra 2 notes that you need to know. And they will always be in the same place in relation to that box of 6 that you're already playing with. Now, those also repeat in a diagonal pattern, up and down the fretboard, up and down the strings. Let's put a fretboard in there. If we put a fretboard in there, then you can see that all of these notes match and they all fall within this box of 6 with the 2 extra notes from your scale. And that's great. And all these notes fit in there and still doesn't, the rule still applies. Doesn't matter where you play in the pentatonic scale, you'll always fall within one of these boxes of 6 notes. But we have to take into account and consideration, and this is an important note, that these top 3 strings, the B string and the E string, they're shunted up one because the tuning difference between G and B is only 4 steps and not 5 like all the other strings. So that means that the whole pattern, and this is the gotcha that gets me every time, the whole pattern needs to shunt up one, like in this direction, right? So if you're playing and your pattern, it goes below that G string up onto the B and the E string, then you need to make sure that you shunt your pattern up a fret so that you can accommodate that change in tuning from the B and the E string. Other than that, the pattern still repeats, and you can still see on this chart, your box of 6 is kind of elongated a little bit, but it's still there. And it's still repeated in the same way that these notes continue diagonally apart from they jump up a fret. So what we can do then is we've got our fretboard, and then we can just say, well, let's just swipe off all the notes we don't need. Now, if I'd have started with this pattern here and said, hey, look, here's my fretboard. These are all the notes of the pentatonic scale. And these are all the additional notes you can add in to make it a full major or a full minor scale. And you go, oh, what a mess. How am I going to remember all of those? But actually, they all still fit within that box of 6 plus the extra 2 Swiss Army knife style. Let's look at the patterns of the pentatonic scale as you would have probably seen them. There are 5 blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 5, the 5 different patterns of the pentatonic scale. And these are the patterns that we've already discussed, but they're actually only just repeats of this box of 6. But how does this relate to the caged system? Now, I've not talked about the caged system before, but I want to bring it up here because this is something that I've been learning about recently, and it kind of struck me that this is what I've been doing mentally, but not documented within my brain. So having this, visualizing it, was actually a really big helper for me to say, well, actually, this is what you can do with the CAGED system on top of the pentatonic scale system. So if you know the pentatonic scales and then you understand how CAGED works, then it frees you to do more varied things with your guitar. So let's start off and look again at these pentatonic blocks. These 5 patterns was something that I spent a long time memorizing individually because I didn't understand the relations that they had between each other. The C, A, G, E, D spells out the chords, the formation of the C chord, the A chord, the G chord, the E chord and the D chord, and how you would play them with your open strings if you were playing C on an open set of strings on your guitar. And then this is the A form. And the same here with the G form and the E chord here as well. And then finally the D chord. And you see how that matches up. But why is that magic? Well, the reason it's magic is this. Here I'm playing a C major chord on the guitar in the A form and the G form and the E form and the D form. This is what we just looked at. But if you look at those, they're all C major. If you play them all, they will all be a C major chord when you play them. So not only does the CAGED system allow you to know where you can play different chords, but the same chord repeats through the A, G, E and D forms. So these are all C major. So if you were playing E major at the nut, then the next letter is D. So to move it up, you would play it in the D form. So here's the C, A, G, E and D form of the C major chord. Nice. They're all C major. Wicked. So why CAGED? Why not faced or badge? There's a couple I've made up. So CAGED are, first of all, C, A, G, E and D are the open chords that you can play without playing them as a bar chord. So if you play F, you've got to play a bar, and B, you've got to play a bar, and F is just a barred, is just a CAGED version of the E major chord, and B is likewise is a barred version of the A major chord. So that's a CAGED version of A. Also, CAGED works with major and minor chords, which is great. CAGED repeats up and down the fretboard, so you can see I've written here you've got CAGED, 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 because it goes. So if you're at D, you can move up to the C form or up to the A form, vice versa. If you're playing in the G form and you want to move down the fretboard to a lower scale of notes, then you can move back to the A form and the C form to stay within that same chord. So you don't have to start on C. If you play an open G chord, then the next one will be the E form. So GEDK works just as well as CAGED. Theoretically, it's identical, just doesn't quite have the same ring to it. And in the key of C major, C, A, G, E and D are your 5 notes of the pentatonic scale. Nice rounded way of finishing back up where we started with the pentatonics. So next step, teleportation, science fiction, guitar fact. Now, if you're at a note on A string, you can move up 2 strings, up 2 frets, and you will always get to the same note 2 octaves higher. In the same way that if you go up and you go up 3 and back 3, you'll get to the same note an octave higher. And it also works in the other direction. So you can go down 3 strings and up 3 frets and you can get to 1 octave down. You can also go, like if you're on a note, then the note directly above you is always going to be the 4th of that note. And the note above you and to the right 2 frets is always going to be the 5th. in the same way that if you go down a note, then you're always going to hit the fifth and then go back to the fourth if you want to, of that note, of that chord, of that note that you're playing on. The only difference is if it's major or minor, you can go down to and up to get to the minor third, or up three if you want to get to the major third. But that's the only real gotcha with this teleportation. And I've only included these few examples, but there are lots more. And my advice would be to find them yourself, because once you found them yourself, then you will know, these are my ways that I get around the fretboard. So let's talk about simple chord progressions, and we can understand how our box of six, which is our box of tricks, the pentatonics, the major and minor scales, and the CAGED system can all work together to help you understand what you need to play and when you should think about playing it. And also you need to bear in mind that these are only guidelines, because what you're actually playing is going to be what you think sounds good, what you think sounds great. Simple chord progression: C, A minor, F, G. Very, very simple chord progression. We're in C major, and we've already talked about how we're gonna play around the fifth fret. We're gonna play from fret 5 to fret 7, and within that space, the C major chord is played in the G form. So you can see those notes are highlighted in pink here. This is the G shape that we would have played, but it's up at the 5th fret. The next chord in our sequence is A minor in the thing, but it's played in the E minor form at the 5th fret. So you can see how this translation of the chord of A minor, instead of being played down here with these notes, it's being played up here with these pink notes that we've got here in the E minor form. Next we move on to our F major, and instead of that chord being barred down here, which is how we would normally play it, we've got that chord being played up here in the C form. And then finally we finish on the G major chord played in the D form at the 5th fret. Now if we go back to our F major, one thing you'll notice is this: the F isn't part of our normal pentatonic scale, but it is the root of this chord. And you can see this is the F right here that is being played in the C form here, in the same way that this note here, right, which is our B, and our B is also not included in our standard pentatonic, our major pentatonic here. So when we play the G major chord, the B chord, which is the 3rd of the G major, is now included in this chord. Thus we observe the fundamental interconnectedness of all things. So I'm going to run through these one more time: C, A minor, F, and G. They're played in the G form, then the E minor form, then the C form, and then the D form at the 5th fret. Now, what I will do is I've recorded a simple, very simple jam track number 4. I'll put a link in the comments down the bottom that you can play along with. And I've also will put a link to the PDF version of this file so that you can go through and download it and view all of the chords, etc., etc. So this is what we find. This is what made it make sense for me. Don't know what to talk about in the next video. I'm pretty sure I would like to do a part 3, but I don't know what it's going to be yet. So we'll see how that goes. But for now, thanks for watching. We're out.